Hey, this is Read to the End. So we are talking about three very important people. Now, I've recently reread the biographies of Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, and Walt Disney. And so there were just some thoughts rattling around related to those guys and the general trajectory of human history and what we ought to and ought not do in the midst of all that. So I just thought I would do an episode related to that. I have the race Marxism one that just came out and a discussion that's going to go on about that. Noise is turning out to be very interesting. There's another book that I am about a third of the way through. I think it's called The Hero with 1,000 Faces or something like that, which is absolutely fantastic. It talks about archetypes and where you find, and it shows examples of the archetypes in mythology. So it's really interesting and really important, and I'm loving reading that. But before we get to that, we will definitely begin with these three pillars of modern history. So Steve Jobs, this is the first biography that we did, I think. Maybe we did Disney first. I'm not sure on that one. But Steve Jobs, of course, founder of Apple, was ousted from Apple, started Next. Apple hit a wall when it came to growth because so much of Apple's brand was built on Jobs' determination to do something new and be innovative in the space and not allow the company to fall into a tit for tat with Microsoft, which would eventually pretty much copy what Apple did, but do it in a more palatable way. And so soak up all the market share. So for Jobs, there were a lot of things about his personality. And I know, like, Bill Burr has this whole series of jokes, this whole bit, the whole thing about how Steve Jobs didn't actually contribute to the tech. He didn't understand the tech. That wasn't what he was capable at. But one of the things, especially when he went back to Apple, because Apple was doing very poorly for a while after Steve Jobs was ousted, and he went to Next, he started Next, and he bought Pixar. I'm not sure if he bought it outright, but he definitely invested a tremendous amount of money into it. And then Pixar just blew up with the release of Toy Story. And then all the movies after that up until, recent history when they've been making trash. But when he was reintegrated into Apple, when he went back to Apple to save it, then so much of what he did, you see it in his personality, and all those things were so important to the success of that company and what it is today. Things like being parsimonious in the number of products that they use, in refining how they did those things, and the marriage of art and technology. When it came to his designers, Johnny Ive, and what Ive was doing, he was stuck in this box when it came to engineering, having the one-up on design, and then it being the other way around when Steve Jobs took back over. So you have that marriage of design and technology, of art and technology, which led to the iPhone. I think he died in 2011, though. So it's been a long time that since Jobs has been at the helm of that. But everything up until then, everything related to like the development of the iPod and how big that was, and development of the Shuffle, how he just said, just get rid of the screen. And using that, it was very popular. And then the video iPod and the negotiations with all of the music companies, that was a big deal. That was a big deal when iTunes was first coming around, was negotiating with these companies to really advance where the music industry was, because it was a big thing. Once technology exploded and people had computers and were getting these little MP3 players and the things, then there was a huge incentive to bootleg all this music. So there was a real crossroads at the time wherein the music industry could have chosen to go this draconian lockdown route and this ghettoized route of different music producers, the owners of different artists. They would do their own individual things to try to get the music to consumers. And it would be very cumbersome and difficult, and people would just have a greater incentive to steal it otherwise. But Jobs at the time, he thought that people wanted to pay for music. They didn't want to steal it, but there was no good way to do it. So then they have the development of iTunes, and he works with all these different production companies, and there were some that were holding out and some that had a lot of problems with it, but then other ones saw the future in it and went that direction, and so much of the rest is history. And then we had things like the Zune come out and other MP3 players that just didn't work. And then we get to the iPhone, and where all of those technologies get married into one thing. But I was just reading the Apple design book related to like app development. And so much of it is about simplicity. And, that was so much of what Jobs was. That's what he was about, was just having the most simplified version of everything, the cleanest version of everything. Now, the biographer, when he talked about Jobs, a lot of it was tied back to the fact that he was adopted and that he didn't have a great father or an involved father and didn't want to be involved with him in general. And that one of the first acts of his life would have been to be discarded by his biological parents. And that was a huge motivating factor for a lot of what he did thereafter. And one thing that struck me was how often he cried when he was in meetings and trying to get things done. It just seemed to be a regular occurrence. He could apparently be very mean, but also very sensitive. And whatever the case, he was an integral part in development of that technology and the company that lives today. The stores also, they would develop this prototype of the store in this warehouse, and they'd go to it every day and just keep working on it and working on it and working on it until it felt right. So there's a lot in there, but there's also, you wonder how much he actually contributed to society, how much he's actually advanced things. The tech is the tech, and, it looks beautiful. I just got a newer one with the titanium on it, and it feels great. I don't think they've changed the design since the 12. I think it's been like 4, at least in a row, that have had the same design. But it's incredible technology, and it facilitates communication in a way that's amazing, and it's created its own ecosystem. But what has it really done to benefit people? What has it really done for the world? There are certain things like making the production and procurement of staples, of important things for human beings more efficient. Maybe it did something there. But other than that, how much of the consumption, how much does it create divisions between people who would otherwise not have those divisions when it comes to like families and communities and things like that? How much does it encourage people with addictive personalities or with toxic inclinations? How much does it encourage them to find others who will reinforce those inclinations? So I'm not sure how much it actually contributed. I think the instinct that Jobs had for a long time when it came to marrying art and tech, that's fantastic, and a lot of good things turned out from that. But I think it needs to be applied in a healthier way, in a way it's more fundamentally beneficial to humanity rather than beneficial to a company. So that's Steve Jobs. Another one, like I said, I reread Elon Musk's biography again. This is the new one because we read the Ashley Vance one, and I did an episode on that. But then we also read the most recent one, which is... Who wrote that? The same one who wrote the Steve Jobs one. And he wrote an Einstein one. I can't remember his name. This is incredible. It's just not in my brain right now. But yeah, so he wrote that, and this is the Elon Musk one. And this one is a more advanced one because it goes all the way up through the Twitter acquisition. Much of the Ashley Vance one, it was so long ago, really. Musk has been on a tear ever since. So many important things happened thereafter. But Musk is kind of a different beast. Now, there's a very similar thing. I don't know if it's an instinct of the author to always tie to this. But for Steve Jobs, it was the fact of having been adopted and dealing with that early trauma. Trauma is probably too strong a word, but maybe not. Maybe it's not a strong enough word. And then for Musk, it's the bullying from not only kids at school, which was extremely severe in some cases, but his father. His father was apparently some flavor of sociopathic, and it's something that even the Musk boys have not been especially forthright about how bad it got when it came to the verbal and physical abuse that they suffered at the hands of their father. So for the author, he suggests that much of that is the reason that Musk is motivated in the way that he is, that he would have this perpetually manic need to accomplish things, whether it's Zip2 or X.com, what became PayPal, or Tesla, or SpaceX, or The Boring Company, or Neuralink, or now XAI, or Twitter, which is now X.com, the actual X. The author suggested that is a major factor in the reason that he's like that. But for me, it's like Elon Musk fits a different niche when it comes to great men in history and the movers of the world. Because Steve Jobs is in one place, and then Elon Musk is grittier and more fundamental when it comes to... the electric cars are great. They're excellent cars. They're fantastic just in general when it comes to the design and everything. they're not accomplishing the world-changing energy revolution that a lot of people would like to claim would happen by virtue of electric cars. But it's not their fault. It's the fact of everything around the electric cars. Every electric car charger, or virtually every anyway, is powered by old school carbon dense technologies like natural gas and coal. But still, I mean, these things are incredible. They're incredibly fast. They're gorgeous. And he has accomplished a tremendous amount. And even if you're not totally sold on it, there are a lot of things about electric cars that are far superior to gas-powered ones. Like I said, even if you don't buy the whole environmental craziness that surrounds virtually every talking point nowadays. But then beyond that, the thing that is primarily motivating to Elon Musk is the SpaceX, is that making humans multiplanetary. Now, of course, there's got to be something psychological beneath that is significant and interesting, but just looking at the surface of it, that's his primary motivation, is getting us to Mars. A lot of people could see that as a means of him running away as far as he can, starting over in a place that isn't so harsh and doing it right this time. Or it could just be somebody who's a true pioneer, that the likes of which we haven't seen since, the 15th century or something. The people who are really willing to get out there and explore things in a truly dangerous and interesting and adventurous way. That the kind of instinct that we generally don't have anymore. And that we might not have the ability to have because so much has been already discovered when it comes to the world. One of the things that really stood out to me when it came to Elon Musk is these fits of manic productiveness that he would have. He would have these charges at his companies where he'd go in and just start cleaning house and demanding these completely unrealistic timelines to get things done. And a subset of that is that he would get absolutely livid at an employee and he would tear them apart in a meeting. And then the next time he saw them, there would be no semblance, no residue of that anger or dissatisfaction or hatred or anything like that, or hostility, which is something that's very difficult for people to do. Of course, a lot of people have suggested, including himself, that he suffers from some version of Asperger's, and it really inhibits his ability to understand the emotions of other people. So when he's really mean to somebody or something like that, it's because he doesn't have an ability to understand how it hurts them. So he just does it because he's trying to get something done. For everybody else, you do that to somebody and you see the hurt in them, and it dissuades you from wanting to do that again. But in all of his companies, and this is something that Steve Jobs talked about too, is he wants to get A players to work with A players, and that's it. Not have any B or C players who are going to drag it down. It's just A players on top of A players. And that's how you get this stuff done. And he wants to have this perpetual, frantic need to get things accomplished all the time. And some could decry that in saying that there are more important things, but others, most of us at least, have to recognize that to get things done is to get things done. And something like creating rockets that are able to fly up into space and drop off satellites and then return to Earth and be reusable, and being able to get us to Mars, I mean, those kinds of things seem certainly worthwhile to me, and more so than a telephone that you can also, play music from and watch videos on and just waste your life on social media. So an interesting character. When it comes to the purchase of Twitter and some of the things that he does in a more public way, you do wonder how in tune with all the vagaries of human interaction and human understanding he really is. I think in the book it talked about how these personal relationships are much more complex than anything that he does, from a technical standpoint with any of his companies. And I think that is a frontier that he would be generally terrified of exploring fundamentally, but is one that we kind of need to, and we need to understand, even though we risk losing a lot of the magic that humanity is. But it could just be for the people who have to do the understanding that they have to risk stepping into the darkness so that they can point everybody else to the light. Walt Disney was the other one that I read again recently, and Disney is one that I think had a much more profound impact on humanity in general, and the dearth of his impact today, I think, is being felt more profoundly than people realize. There was a legacy that was held on to by his company for a long time that still worked off of his first principles. And that's why we got the second wave of the Disney success with the 90s animated movies, the Little Mermaids and Lion King and Hercules and Mulan and those kinds of movies that still carried the torch of early Disney. Didn't really have the timelessness of early Disney, but did carry the torch and had a lot of the archetypes that are very important and kept the species moving along, chugging along, if not at the same pace or with the same breadth and support of early Disney. It still managed to do it in a significant way. But then after that, once we lost that spark and started going into stories for profit mode, when that was the only point. Because for Disney, that most certainly was not the point. That was not the point early on. That's why he doubled and tripled down over and over and over again. Every bit of his success, every ounce of money that he had to borrow and all the struggle and fight and everything that they had to do for the early movies, it was really about telling an important story. And I think that it's something we've taken for granted for a very long time. Having great stories as the backbone of our civilization. It's something we've taken for granted, and we've lost that. Most recently, we very much lost that. So historically, we had books we had the oral tradition before that, but then we had books that would retell these stories over and over again. Whether it's Homer or Shakespeare or Kafka, just as you go through history, you have these storytellers that would encapsulate all the complexities of being human and the archetypes that were fundamental to our understanding of life and what our species is and what our species should be doing. Those things were there. Like I said, they were a backbone of our civilization for a long time, and that helped us get through a lot of very difficult eras and very dangerous eras. And we had that carried on by Walt Disney in many of his movies, in the Snow Whites and the Pinocchios and Cinderellas and Peter Pans. These movies, they got to restate and play with these archetypes. They got to be complex but still accessible to children. They got to use a new medium to be able to do it, something that was magical at the time. And that really captured that storytelling and the archetypes that people needed to still be human, to still have that human interest and wonder and adventure. And then we get to the corporatized version of that. And I don't say that in kind of a mundane way. It's fine to be a corporation. It's fine to try to make profits. And it's fine to care about whether a lot of people see your movie. But there was really a fundamental corporatization of the storytelling process, especially at Disney and Pixar now, that stripped away the things that were much deeper and more resonant about that kind of storytelling. And it's just so obvious now. Like I said, they had a legacy, a tale that they were holding on to for a long time that they got to ride out for years, for decades really, that they didn't have to tell good stories or be resonant or have those archetypes in place. And then I think Jordan Peterson talks about this, how terrible Frozen is. It was extremely popular. Lots and lots of people saw it. It had some catchy songs. It had a unique look, and it had a new story structure. So a lot of people went and saw it without realizing just how much violence it was doing to all of the archetypes that undergirded all the rest of storytelling in Western civilization. And so now we're feeling the effects of that when it comes to the malaise and depression and the loneliness of these generations that are coming up now, and even in my generation, feeling the effects of that ambiguity or the ambivalence when you're wondering about what you should be doing as a person. I think out of the three people that we talked about, I think Walt Disney was the most vital, did the most positive, and is the most missed. Because yes, tech will advance, and it's incredible and it's magical. It's an important and a vital and an interesting thing for tech to advance the way that it has at the hands of someone like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. But when it advanced at the hands of Walt Disney, it was a way to invigorate the storytelling that was necessary to propel us into the future as human beings who look for adventure, who want to be part of each other, who want to do the important things that we have done for millions of years. And those things we lost, it's one thing to be able to text somebody across the country on my phone. I can see them on video and it's crystal clear and wonderful and beautiful. But there are still so many things that are missing out there, and there are much more significant fundamental things that are missing, even if I have those technological advances that I do have. And I think Walt Disney was the arbiter or the vanguard of a lot of those stories that are simply more important than anything else that we have, that we can hold in our hands, or that we can drive down the street, or that we can fly off into space. So those are just some thoughts related to those three great men that have done some incredible things. Only one of them still living, so he still has likely some things to do. And I appreciate you listening, and I'm not even going to insult you with an apology for taking so long to get these episodes out anymore. But it's my fault, and I will try to do better. I appreciate you. Like I said, I appreciate you listening. I hope there's something illuminating or interesting about these episodes, and I will see you on the next one. All right, bye.